Here we go again.
No, not again.
You've been fooled.
How long have we been doing this?
Once more unto the
Again, until we're both dead.
Hello and welcome to You've Seen It Before, movie reviews with connections in mind. 12 Strong is directed by Nikolai Bulge. I apologize if I got the pronunciation wrong. Produced by Jerry Bruckheimer and stars Chris Hemsworth, Michael Shannon, Michael Pena, and others. Is in the story of the Horse Soldiers, a group of 12 U.S. Special Forces soldiers who were sent into Afghanistan in the immediate wake of the 9/11 terrorist attacks in order to lay the groundwork for the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan and the overthrow of the Taliban. Now, this movie review will contain certain spoilers of 12 Strong, as well as certain other movies. There will be a full list of the description below. And if you've not seen 12 Strong yet and want to wait until you have, stop the video at this point and come back later. Both these things in mind, though, let's begin. Now, since 12 Strong is a war film and is based on true events, as I've said in the past in regards to films based on true events, it is sort of hard to say where you've seen things before in regards to plot details, since these are based on true events. But I can point you towards certain war film tropes that this film emulates that you certainly have seen in films that have come before, such as the trope of a superior officer who is not necessarily skilled in the ways of war, learning all about war and how to lead men into combat during a war scenario. In the case of 12 Strong, it is the character of Captain Nelson, played by Chris Hemsworth, who is unexperienced leading his men into a combat scenario, and who learns how to lead his men in a real-life war. Similar in terms with another war film that's come before, mainly Battle of the Bulge, with the lieutenant played by James MacArthur, who is a naive lieutenant who essentially bosses around the lower rank officers who clearly know more than he does. But as the movie moves on and the battles intensify, he learns what it means to lead men into battle and lead them through war. So there's an interesting parallel there. Next, this film documents the story of the Horse Soldiers, namely the fact that there are only 12 U.S. soldiers and a few hundred Afghan fighters against a force of approximately 50,000 Taliban and Al-Qaeda fighters in Afghanistan leading up to their main objective. And this movie basically harps on the point that they're facing overwhelming odds in manpower against these hardened Taliban and Al-Qaeda fighters. And they somehow manage to hold them off and beat them back in order to achieve their objective. Now, this is very similar. You've seen this in many war films, but the example that I've come up with is the 2014 film Fury, in which a World War II tank crew consisting of about 5 men in a Sherman tank, broken down at a crossroads, has to face off against a full battalion of German SS troops near the end of World War II. And despite all odds and many casualties on the Americans' front, they are able to hold off this attack of a SS battalion, and they're able to hold the crossroads. So there's an interesting parallel there. Finally, 12 Strong also harps upon the fact that these U.S. Special Forces have to go into Afghanistan and essentially hold the Afghan Northern Alliance together, which is a group of 3 generals who really who all oppose the Taliban, but also oppose each other. And if they get in each other's way, then there's the chance that they will stop fighting the Taliban and fight each other, and that will do no one any good. And so it is the goal of the U.S. Special Forces in Afghanistan in order to keep this alliance together and keep them fighting against their common enemy. Now, this is a war trope that you've seen in countless films and TV shows. The examples that I came up with were from Star Trek Deep Space Nine in its later years during the Dominion War arc, which sees that the crew of Deep Space Nine trying to keep the alliance of the Federation, the Klingon Empire, and the Romulans all banded together against the Dominion, whereas they all don't necessarily like each other, and you've seen that. We see that throughout the course of that arc throughout the later years of Deep Space Nine, as well as Stargate SG-1, where these forces of Earth have to corral their own forces, the forces of the Tok'ra Resistance, and the Free Jaffa Resistance, in order to keep their common enemy of the Gould in mind, whereas there's also bad blood between all three of these forces, and they have to keep that alliance together. Now, with all these connections being said, would I recommend you see 12 Strong? I would say sure, but I would also say that this movie was a little average in my opinion. I would say it's definitely an extraordinary story that deserves to be told, but the way that the film is shot, it feels like it's going through the motions. I said this in my written review, that this film, it sort of gives me the same feeling as I saw World Trade Center with Nicolas Cage and also Michael Pena and Michael Shannon. That film also, both of these films take place around the same time and around the same events, but it just sort of feels like they're going through the motions, whereas they're not really conveying the certain kind of emotions that these events really need. And it feels like both of these films are sort of coasting on the sort of the feelings that the audience is supposed to feel around these events, and that by the time that a victory happens at the end of both these films, that we're supposed to feel elated, and it's supposed to give this film a positive feeling. And while both these films do that both these films also, it just doesn't come off right, and it's trying to replicate feelings and emotions that may not actually be able to be replicated. And I feel like this is a perfectly acceptable film. There's nothing necessarily bad about 12 Strong, but there's nothing really stand out about it. And my feeling is that you're probably, if you want to experience the story of the horse soldiers, that you're probably better off reading the book on which the screenplay was based. So I would say, if you wanted to see it, definitely go check it out. But I would say if you didn't, if you'd rather just read the book, then I would not blame you at all. So there you have it. There's my review of 12 Strong. I'd hope to start 2018 on a more positive note, but as it stands, it's more of a meh movie. So there you have it. There's my review. I appreciate whatever audience I can get. Be sure to check out my written review of 12 Strong on imdb.com. I can't place a link in the description below because of IMDb's changing their policies. Look for the review by author Regula 1. That's REGULA 1. And yeah, be sure to check out my reviews next. The next new release of 2018 that I'm going to be reviewing is Black Panther, coming out in February. I may post a review of a older film, essentially a throwback film review before that, but until then, thank you all for watching, and just remember, there's nothing new under the sun, and yes, you have seen it before.